In the heart of the Galactic Federation, humanity stands on the brink of being cast aside. For 30 years, we fought to earn our place among the stars, but today, a grave accusation is made. The coalition of hegemony, led by the ruthless Dwarthan Empire and the cunning Kalari Confederacy, claims humanity is too dangerous, too violent, and demands we be quarantined to our home system. What they don't know is that they've just triggered a chain of events that will reveal humanity's true nature. Underestimating us was their first mistake, and now the hunt begins. The diplomatic trap ambassador Sarah Chun stood before a grand assembly of worlds, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive amphitheater that housed representatives from over 800 different species. The structure itself was a marvel of engineering, a hollow sphere 3 kilometers in diameter, with seating arranged in concentric rings that rose like terraced mountains toward the curved ceiling. Bioluminescent coral from the Aquari homeworld provided gentle lighting, while the air was carefully filtered to accommodate the breathing requirements of dozens of different atmospheric preferences. For 30 years, humanity had held probationary status in the Galactic Federation. 30 years of careful diplomacy, of proving they could be civilized, of following every rule and regulation with meticulous precision. Today was supposed to be the day they finally achieved full membership. Instead, Sarah found herself standing trial. The chair recognizes Ambassador Chen of the Terran Republic, announced the session moderator a crystalline being whose species had evolved from sentient minerals. Its voice resonated through the chamber like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Sarah activated her personal translator and stepped forward. At 53, she was one of the most experienced diplomats in human history. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her dark eyes held the patience of someone who had spent decades navigating the complex politics of galactic civilization. She wore the simple blue and white uniform of the Earth diplomatic corps, deliberately modest compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor of other species representatives. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I stand before you today not just as a representative of humanity, but as someone who has devoted her life to the principles of peace and cooperation that bind our Federation together. For 3 decades, my people have proven their commitment to these values. We have honored every treaty, respected every boundary, and contributed to the common good of all species." A ripple of what might have been approval passed through some sections of the assembly, but Sarah's trained eye caught the subtle signs of hostility from others. The Vorthan delegation, with their imposing reptilian forms and elaborate ceremonial scarring, sat in stony silence. The Kalari representatives, bird-like beings with iridescent feathers, preened their plumage in what Sarah recognized as a display of agitation. "However," continued the moderator, "before we proceed with the membership confirmation, the chair must address certain concerns raised by the Hegemony Coalition. Ambassador Zethkaller of the Vorthan Empire has requested to present evidence that humanity poses a significant threat to galactic stability." Sarah's stomach tightened. This was not part of the scheduled proceedings. She watched as Ambassador Zethkaller rose from his seat, his 2-meter frame covered in the ceremonial armor of his species. His elongated skull bore the ritual scars of a warrior diplomat, and his yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of an apex predator. "Honored delegates," Zethkaller began, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor. "We must speak plainly about the nature of the species we are considering for full membership. Humanity claims to be peaceful, but their own history tells a different story." The chamber's central holographic display activated, showing images from Earth's past. Sarah watched in growing horror as scenes of human warfare flickered before the assembly. Ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval sieges, the mechanized slaughter of the world wars, nuclear explosions that had scarred Earth's surface. "These beings," Zethkaller continued, "evolved not as creators or builders, but as persistence hunters. They are predators who develop the ability to track their prey across vast distances, wearing them down through sheer endurance. Their entire evolutionary history is one of violence and conquest. Sarah started to object, but the moderator's chimes indicated she was not recognized to speak. More troubling still, added Ambassador Virental of the Kaleri Confederacy, her musical voice carrying an edge of accusation. Is their behavior since joining the Federation? They have established colonies on 17 worlds, ostensibly for agriculture and mining. Yet, our intelligence reports indicate these colonies are all strategically positioned along major trade routes. They claim to be farmers and miners, but their settlements follow the patterns of military installations. The holographic display shifted to show star charts. Sarah had to admit that when viewed from this perspective, human colonies did appear to form a defensive network around Earth and the major shipping lanes. But that was coincidence, not conspiracy. Furthermore, Zethkaller resumed, we have analyzed their entertainment media, their literature, their military exercises. Even their children's games are based on conflict and competition. This is not a species that has transcended its violent nature. It is one that has learned to hide it. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Sarah could see delegates from neutral species beginning to look concerned. The Hegemony Coalition had clearly planned this ambush carefully, timing it to catch humanity off guard. The Coalition's position is clear, Zethkaller declared. Humanity represents an evolutionary aberration, a species that achieves spaceflight, an advanced technology while retaining the instincts of apex predators. They cannot be trusted with full membership in the Federation. We propose instead that they be quarantined to their home system, with all colonial populations to be relocated within 90 standard days. The chamber erupted in discussion. Sarah saw some delegates nodding agreement, while others looked uncertain. The timing was perfect. The coalition had presented their case when many of humanity's supporters were absent from the session. The chair recognizes Ambassador Chen for rebuttal. Announced the moderator. Sarah stepped forward, her mind racing. She had prepared for many scenarios, but not this coordinated attack. Honor delegates, what you have witnessed is a carefully orchestrated presentation designed to provoke fear rather than promote understanding. Yes, humanity has a violent past, but we have also demonstrated our capacity for growth, for learning, for choosing cooperation over conflict. She gestured to the display, which now showed images of human achievements, cities powered by clean energy, scientific research stations, humanitarian aid missions to alien worlds. We have spent centuries learning to control our aggressive impulses. We have built societies based on law and justice. We have contributed to galactic civilization in countless ways. But you haven't evolved beyond your nature, interrupted Zethkaller. You have simply learned to suppress it. And suppression is not elimination. Under sufficient pressure, you will revert to your predatory instincts. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Dvorthin's tone that suggested this was more than academic debate. Ambassador Zethkaller, are you suggesting that humanity should be judged not by our actions, but by your fears of what we might become? I am suggesting that the Federation has a responsibility to protect its members from potential threats, even if those threats have not yet manifested. The vote was called with shocking speed. Sarah barely had time to present her full defense before the moderator announced that the motion to quarantine humanity had passed by a margin of 847 to 23. The few species that had voted against the measure were humanity's oldest allies, but they were vastly outnumbered. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out, Sarah stood alone in the center of the chamber. 30 years of careful diplomacy destroyed in a single afternoon. She activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to Earth. The garden party is over. Time to show them what we really are. The message was brief, but it carried the weight of 30 years of preparation. Since the day humanity had first encountered alien life, they had known this moment might come. They had hoped it wouldn't, had worked tirelessly to prevent it. But they had prepared for it nonetheless. Within hours, the message had been relayed through quantum communication networks to every human colony, every trading post, every research station in the galaxy. To outside observers, it appeared to be a simple notification about the Assembly's decision, but embedded within the standard. Diplomatic language was a code that every human off-world had memorized. Protocol Omega was now active. On the agricultural world of New Harmony, Dr. Elena Vasquez received the message while tending to her hydroponic gardens. To her alien neighbors, she was a xenobotanist studying cross-species crop development. In reality, she was a former colonel in Earth's Special Operations Command, and her research facility contained enough weapons to outfit a small army. On the trading station Crossroads, Merchant Captain James Liu was negotiating the purchase of rare minerals when his communicator chimed. To the Kalari trader across from him, James appeared to be a simple businessman. The truth was that James had spent 15 years in Earth's intelligence service, and his cargo ship was equipped with stealth technology that made it invisible to most alien sensors. In the research laboratories of the Vorthan Academy of Sciences, Dr. Marcus Webb continued his work on alien biochemistry with the same calm professionalism he had shown for 8 years. His colleagues had no idea that his research had been systematically cataloging the biological weaknesses of every major species in the Federation. Across the galaxy, thousands of humans received the message. Farmers and miners, scientists and traders, teachers and mechanics, all of them hiding their true nature behind carefully constructed civilian identities. For 30 years, they had been the Federation's most model citizens. Now, they were about to become its greatest nightmare. The Hegemony Coalition had made a fatal error. They had studied humanity's history and concluded that humans were dangerous because of their violent nature. But they had fundamentally misunderstood what made humanity truly terrifying. It wasn't that humans were violent. It was that they were patient. For 30 years, humanity had been building relationships, establishing positions, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the day when their peaceful facade would no longer be sufficient. They had learned every alien language, studied every species biology and psychology, mapped every strategic location in the galaxy. The Coalition thought they were dealing with primitive predators driven by instinct. They were about to discover they had declared war on an entire species of strategists who had been planning for this exact scenario since the day they left Earth. As Sarah Chen prepared to leave the Grand Assembly for the last time, she allowed herself a small smile. The Hegemony Coalition had wanted to see humanity's true nature. They were about to get their wish. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's apex predators had ruled their world for so long, and why when they finally revealed themselves, even the stars would tremble. Protocol Omega was active, and the hunt was about to begin. The Hunter's Moon, 72 hours after the Grand Assembly's vote. The first accident occurred. The Vorthan heavy cruiser Dominance was conducting routine patrol operations along the Kepler corridor when its primary navigation system experienced what the official report would later call catastrophic cascade failure. The ship's computer core, which had functioned flawlessly for 8 years, suddenly began executing commands that no one had programmed. Course corrections became violent lurches. Weapon systems activated without authorization. Life support cycled through emergency protocols in rapid succession. Captain Nexvoller, a veteran of 3 colonial wars, had never experienced anything like it. His ship bucked and twisted through space like a wounded animal, completely beyond his control. By the time his engineering teams managed to shut down the affected systems manually, the Dominance was drifting powerless in space. Its crew of 800 struggling with failing life support. How is this possible? Vexvoller demanded of his chief. Engineer, these systems were inspected just last week. Engineer Prime Kelksmatol studied the diagnostic readouts with growing confusion. Sir, the failure patterns don't match any known malfunction profile. It's as if the computer was deliberately sabotaged, but our security systems show no unauthorized access. What neither of them knew was that 8 months earlier, a human software consultant named David Park, had been contracted to optimize the ship's navigation algorithms. David had been recommended by the Galactic Software Consortium as an expert in multi-species interface design. His work had been thorough, professional, and completely undetectable by standard security scans because David Park didn't exist. The man who had spent 3 weeks aboard the Dominance was actually Lieutenant Commander Nathan Cross of Earth's Cyber Warfare Division, and optimization patches he had installed were designed to activate only upon receiving a specific quantum signature, the same signature embedded in the message sent from the Grand Assembly. The Dominance wasn't alone. Across Coalition space, similar accidents began occurring with disturbing frequency. The Kaleri flagship Bright Talon lost its primary fusion reactor due to unexpected resonance patterns in its magnetic containment field, a Vorthan supply. Convoy found its cargo holds flooding with toxic gas when their atmospheric processors suddenly reversed their filtration cycles. The Coalition's primary communication relay at the Nexus station went offline when its quantum processors developed spontaneous decoherence issues. On the industrial world of Vorthan Prime, Dr. Marcus Webb maintained his cover perfectly. To his colleagues at the Biochemical Research Institute, he appeared as concerned as anyone about the growing number of technical failures affecting Coalition forces. He attended emergency meetings, offered suggestions for improved security protocols, and worked overtime analyzing the mysterious malfunctions. Marcus was 42 years old, with the lean build of a long-distance runner and the patient demeanor of a career academic. His human colleagues in the institute knew him as a dedicated xenobiologist who had devoted his career to understanding alien physiology. His Vorthan supervisors respected his thorough research methods and innovative analytical techniques. None of them suspected that for 8 years, Marcus had been systematically cataloging every biological weakness of every species. In the Federation, the pattern is troubling, Marcus said during a staff meeting, his voice carrying just the right note of academic concern. These technical failures seem to be targeting critical infrastructure in ways that suggest detailed knowledge of our systems. His supervisor, Director Vethkaller, nodded grimly. Our intelligence services are investigating the possibility of sabotage. But who could have gained such comprehensive access to our technology? Marcus shook his head thoughtfully. Perhaps we're looking at this from the wrong angle. Instead of asking who had access, we should ask who had the patience to plan something. This level of coordination suggests years of preparation. He was right, of course. What Marcus didn't mention was that he had been one of the primary architects of that preparation. His research into Vorthan biology had revealed that their respiratory system was particularly vulnerable to certain airborne compounds that could be synthesized from common industrial chemicals. His studies of Kaleri physiology had identified specific frequencies of electromagnetic radiation that could disrupt their neural function. His analysis of 17 other Coalition species had yielded equally detailed intelligence about their weaknesses. All of this information had been carefully documented and transmitted to Earth through channels so subtle that the most sophisticated surveillance systems had never detected them. Marcus had hidden his reports in academic papers, encoded them in genetic sequence data, and embedded them in routine administrative communications. For 8 years, he had been the Federation's most productive xenobiological researcher, while simultaneously conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt of the Centauri system, Captain Rosa Martinez was about to demonstrate another aspect of humanity's 30-year deception. Her ship, the Lucky Strike, was registered as a Class 3 mining vessel operated by Celestial Extraction Incorporated. According to her documentation, Rosa was a 47-year-old geologist from the Luna colonies who had been working the asteroid fields for 15 years. The documentation was impeccable. Rosa's background had been carefully constructed by Earth's intelligence services, complete with academic records, employment history, and even fabricated personal relationships. She had attended conferences, published papers on asteroid composition, and built a reputation as one of the most successful independent miners in the sector. What the documentation didn't mention was that Rosa Martinez had graduated first in her class from the Earth Naval Academy, served as a tactical officer aboard 3 different warships, and spent 5 years as an instructor at Advanced Combat School. The Lucky Strike might look like a mining ship, but its hull was reinforced with military-grade armor. Its engines could outrun most Coalition fighters, and its cargo holds contained enough firepower to level a small city. Incoming transmission from Coalition patrol vessel Swift Justice, announced her communications officer, a young woman named Katie Chen, who was supposedly Rose's mining partner, but was actually a former signals intelligence specialist. "Put them through," Rosa replied, settling into the captain's chair with the relaxed demeanor of someone who had nothing to hide. The screen flickered to life, showing the scaled face of a Kalari naval officer. "Mining vessel Lucky Strike. This is Commander Vash Talon of the Coalition Security Force. We are conducting random inspections of all civilian vessels in this sector. Prepare to be boarded." Rosa nodded politely. "Of course, Commander. We'll drop to minimal power and prepare." Our documentation. Though, I should warn you, we've been processing low-grade platinum ore all week. The dust gets into everything. It was a perfect performance. Rose's voice carried just the right mixture of cooperation and mild annoyance. Her ship's power signature dropped to normal civilian levels. Her crew moved about their duties with the unhurried efficiency of experienced miners. What Commander Vash Talon couldn't see was the silent transformation taking place throughout the ship. Bulkheads that appeared to be simple storage compartments were sliding aside to reveal weapon systems. The ship's mining laser was rotating. Into position, its output modulated to military specifications. In the cargo bay, what looked like ore processing equipment was reconfiguring itself into a tactical command center. The Coalition boarding party consisted of 6 Kalari Marines in standard security armor. They boarded the Lucky Strike with the casual confidence of officers who had conducted hundreds of routine inspections. They examined the ship's documentation, scanned the cargo holds with their sensors, and interviewed the crew about their mining operations. They found exactly what they expected to find: a legitimate mining operation run by experienced professionals who were fully cooperative with Coalition authorities. "Everything appears to be in order," Commander Vash Talon announced after 45 minutes of inspection. "Thank you for your cooperation, Captain Martinez." "Always happy to help," Rosa replied with a smile. "Safe travels, Commander." The Coalition patrol vessel departed without incident. Rosa waited exactly 17 minutes, long enough for the Swift Justice to be beyond their sensor range before activating her ship's true systems. "All stations, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's internal communications. "Operation Hunter's Moon is now active. Begin Phase 2 deployment." Throughout the ship, Rosa's crew shed their civilian disguises like snakes molting old skin. Katie Chen activated the ship's military-grade communications array and began coordinating with other hidden assets throughout the sector. Chief Engineer Tom Walsh, who had spent 15 years pretending to be a mining equipment specialist, powered up the ship's stealth systems and advanced sensors. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Rosa's supposed financial advisor, took her position at the tactical station and began targeting solutions for the dozen Coalition installations within strike range. The Lucky Strike wasn't alone. Across human space and beyond, similar transformations were taking place. Mining ships revealed themselves as stealth destroyers. Agricultural processing stations activated their hidden weapon systems. Scientific research facilities began transmitting targeting data to sleeper assets positioned throughout Coalition territory. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobotanist from New Harmony, opened her greenhouse's concealed armory and began distributing weapons to the colony's farmers, who were actually members of Earth's special forces who have been waiting 8 years for this moment. Merchant Captain James Yu, activated his ship's cloaking device, and began intercepting coalition communications. Research station Kepler-7 extended its hidden sensor arrays and started mapping every military installation within 50 light years. But perhaps the most devastating revelation came from an unexpected source. On the fortress world of Calais, Prime, the coalition's most secure military installation, Chief Information Systems Administrator Yuki Tanaka had been maintaining the Central Defense Network for 6 years. Her work was exemplary. She had improved system efficiency by 23%, reduced maintenance requirements by 30%, and earned 3 commendations for her innovative security protocols. Yuki's only quirk was her insistence on using what she called adaptive security algorithms that constantly evolved to meet new threats. Her supervisors had been impressed by the sophistication of her programming and had allowed her to implement her improvements across the entire planetary defense grid. Those improvements included quantum encrypted backdoors that could only be activated by a signal from Earth. When that signal arrived, Yuki didn't even need to be present. The system executed her hidden protocols automatically. The results were catastrophic. Calais Prime's orbital defense platforms began targeting each other instead of potential threats. The planetary shield generator developed massive power fluctuations that made it impossible to maintain a stable defensive barrier. Most critically, the secure communication network that coordinated the coalition's military operations suddenly became completely transparent to human intelligence services. Commander Vashtalan was in his ready room, aboard the Swift Justice, when his communications officer brought him the first reports of system failures across coalition space. As he read through the growing list of malfunctions, a cold realization began to form in his mind. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we're receiving priority communications from Fleet Command. All coalition vessels are ordered to return to their home systems immediately. There are reports of coordinated sabotage across 17 sectors." Vashtalan studied the tactical display showing coalition fleet positions. Red warning indicators were appearing everywhere, marking ships and installations that had suffered critical failures. The pattern was too widespread, too coordinated to be coincidental. "Set course for Calais Prime," he ordered. "Maximum speed." But as the Swift Justice engaged its hyperdrive, Vashtalan couldn't shake the memory of his recent inspection of the human mining vessel. Captain Martinez had been perfectly cooperative, her ship completely normal, her crew exactly what they appeared to be, which was precisely what made them so terrifying. The coalition had spent weeks preparing for war against humanity, expecting to face a primitive species driven by violent instincts. Instead, they were discovering they had declared war on an opponent who had been preparing for this conflict since the day they left their home system. The humans hadn't been hiding their violent nature. They had been hiding their strategic brilliance. And now, after 30 years of patient planning, the apex predators of Earth were finally ready to hunt. The Apex Predators Gambit Part 3. The Pax Judgment Admiral Thane Voss stood on the bridge of the Coalition Dreadnought, Inevitable Victory, watching Earth grow larger on the tactical display. Behind him, the largest armada in galactic history stretched across space, 10,000 ships from 47 different species, all united in their determination to end the human threat once and for all. "Final approach to the Sol system," reported his tactical officer, a young Vorthan named Keth Fowler. "Long-range sensors show no significant defensive installations around the primary target." Thane nodded grimly. At 63, he was one of the Coalition's most experienced military commanders, a veteran of the Outer Rim Wars and the architect of their victory over the rebellious Syntoid Collective. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of 17 major battles, and his tactical genius was legendary throughout Coalition space. But he had never faced an enemy like humanity. The past 3 months had been a nightmare of systematic destruction. Human sleeper agents had revealed themselves across Coalition territory, striking with surgical precision at critical infrastructure. Entire fleets had been disabled by malfunctions that turned their own systems against them. Military installations had been infiltrated and destroyed from within. The coalition's communication networks had been compromised so thoroughly that their own intelligence services could no longer distinguish real information from human disinformation. Most disturbing of all, the humans had demonstrated an understanding of coalition tactics and technology that could only have come from decades of careful study. They anticipated every move, countered every strategy, and seemed to be always 3 steps ahead. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Vexteller, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth, audio only." "Put it through," Thane ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, and utterly without fear. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force. I am authorized to negotiate the terms of your surrender." A wave of angry chittering and roaring passed through the coalition officers on the bridge. The idea that these primitive humans would demand their surrender was absurd beyond measure. "This is Admiral Thane Voss," he replied, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are outnumbered 10,000 to 1. Your home system appears to be defenseless. What possible terms could you offer that would prevent us from reducing your world to ash?" There was a pause, and when the human admiral spoke again, Thane could hear something that chilled him to his core. Amusement. "Admiral Voss, you've studied our history. We evolved as persistent hunters, predators who would track their prey across vast distances, wearing them down through patience and endurance. But there's something your intelligence services missed about persistent hunting. And what is that? The most important part isn't the chase. It's knowing when to stop chasing and start to kill." The transmission cut off. Thane stared at the tactical display, feeling the first stirrings of genuine unease. Earth hung before them like a blue-green jewel, apparently defenseless. No orbital platforms, no fleet formations, no defensive installations of any kind. It was exactly what they had expected to find. A primitive world protected by nothing more than the few dozen patrol ships that humanity had claimed as their entire military force. So, why did he feel like he was walking into a trap? "Sir," Kethvalor called out, his voice filled with disbelief. "Coalition ships are turning on each other. The Kaleri 3rd Fleet just opened fire on the Vorthin 7th Squadron." Thane spun toward the tactical display, watching in horror as green and red indicators began flashing throughout his fleet. Ships that had been fighting alongside each other moments before were now exchanging devastating volleys of fire. "What's happening?" he demanded. "It's their communication systems, sir," Vextelar reported frantically. "The humans have taken control of our fleet-wide coordination network. They're sending false orders, making it appear that different squadrons have turned traitor." But it was worse than that. As Thane watched, he realized the humans weren't just causing random chaos. They were exploiting every political tension, every historical grievance, every barely contained rivalry between coalition species. The Kaleri had always resented Vorthin dominance of the coalition military. The crystalline Zephyrians had territorial disputes with the gas giant-dwelling Nebulans. Dozens of minor conflicts that had been suppressed in the name of unity were suddenly erupting across the battlefield. "Cut all external communications," Thane ordered. "Switch to emergency local command protocols." "Sir, we can," Kethvalor replied. "The humans have integrated their viruses so deeply into our systems that disconnecting would disable half our ship functions. We'd be defenseless." Thane realized with growing horror that this had been the human strategy all along. For 30 years, they have been inserting themselves into coalition infrastructure, offering helpful improvements and innovative solutions. Every software upgrade, every technical consultation, every system optimization had been a Trojan horse, carrying hidden code that could be activated when needed. The coalition hadn't just been fighting humanity for 3 months. They had been infiltrated by humanity for 3 decades. "Admiral," Communications Officer Vexteller called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet commander." "Put it through," Thane ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. Admiral Sarah Mitchell's voice filled the bridge again. Still calm and professional. Admiral Voss, you now understand the situation. Your fleet is destroying itself from within. Your communication networks belong to us. Your command structure has collapsed. But this demonstration is not about cruelty. It's about education. What do you want? Thane asked. I want you to understand what you've been fighting. The Coalition made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. You studied our history and concluded that we were dangerous because we were violent. But violence was never our defining characteristic. On the tactical display, Thane watched as more coalition ships turned on each other, their crews following orders that appeared to come from legitimate command authorities, but were actually generated by human computer viruses. Our defining characteristic, Admiral Mitchell continued, is adaptation. We are persistence hunters not because we are naturally faster or stronger than our prey, but because we learn. We observe, we plan. We adapt our strategies until we find one that works. And then we execute that strategy with absolute precision and overwhelming force. The battle, if it could still be called a battle, continued for another 6 hours. But the outcome had been decided the moment the Coalition fleet entered the Sol system. The humans had spent 30 years studying their enemies, identifying their weaknesses, and preparing for this exact scenario. Every contingency had been planned for. Every possible Coalition response had been anticipated and countered by the time the surviving Coalition ships requested terms for surrender. They had lost over 7,000 vessels. The human fleet had suffered fewer than 200 casualties. Admiral Thane Voss found himself standing in the conference room of his own flagship, but no longer in command of it. Human technicians had taken control of the inevitable victory systems within the first hour of battle, and now he was essentially a prisoner aboard his own ship. Across the table from him sat Admiral Sarah Mitchell, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the kind of patient eyes that Thane now recognized as the mark of a true predator. She was accompanied by 2 other humans, a younger man in a military uniform, who carried himself like a special forces operative, and a woman in civilian clothes who somehow projected more menace than either of the military officers. Admiral Voss, Sarah began, let me be clear about the terms we're offering. The Coalition will withdraw all forces from human space immediately. All economic sanctions against humanity will be lifted. Reparations will be paid for the damages caused by this unprovoked attack. Thane stared at her in disbelief. You're dictating terms to the entire Galactic Federation? No, Sarah replied calmly. We're dictating terms to the Hegemony Coalition. The Federation still exists, and humanity still wishes to be part of it. But the Coalition's attempt to establish dominance over other species ends here. The civilian woman leaned forward slightly. My name is Director Catherine Walsh of Earth Intelligence Services. For the past 30 years, my operatives have been embedded throughout Coalition space. We know everything about your governments, your military capabilities, your economic vulnerabilities, and your political weaknesses. This war could continue, but it would not go well for you. She placed a data pad on the table. These are detailed analyses of every Coalition species' home system defenses. As you can see, we've identified critical vulnerabilities in each one. We could disable your homeworld's infrastructure without firing a shot. Thane scrolled through the data, his despair deepening with each page. The humans hadn't just been preparing for a defensive war. They had been preparing for the complete subjugation of their enemies, if necessary. Why? He asked finally. Why show mercy now? You have us completely at your mercy. Admiral Mitchell stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the wreckage of the Coalition fleet drifting through space. Because that's what separates apex predators from mindless killers, Admiral. We know when to stop hunting. She turned back to face him. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to be part of it as equals. But we will never again allow ourselves to be threatened with extinction because other species fear what we might become. The Special Forces officer spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much combat. The Coalition spent months studying our violent history and concluded that we were dangerous. Savages. But you missed the most important part of that history, which is we learned to control our violence, we learned to direct it with precision, and most importantly, we learned when not to use it at all. Director Walsh retrieved her datapad and stood. You have 48 hours to communicate our terms to your respective governments. I suggest you emphasize that these terms are considerably more generous than what we could impose by force. As the humans prepared to leave, Admiral Mitchell paused at the door. Admiral Voss, I want you to understand something. Humanity spent 30 years preparing for this war, not because we wanted to fight it, but because we wanted to end it as quickly as possible. Every contingency we planned, every weakness we identified, every system we infiltrated, all of it was designed to minimize casualties on both sides. How can you call this minimizing casualties? Thane gestured toward the viewport where the wreckage of thousands of ships drifted in space. Because if we had been the savage predators you believed us to be, Sarah replied quietly, your entire fleet would have been destroyed in the first hour, and we would be conducting orbital bombardments of your homeworlds right now. Instead, most of your crews are alive, your governments remain intact, and your species will continue to exist. She paused at the threshold. The Coalition made the mistake of threatening humanity's survival. We responded by demonstrating that we could threaten yours. Now that the balance of power has been established, we can return to the business of peaceful coexistence. 48 hours later, every Coalition government had accepted the human terms, unconditionally. 6 months after that, the Galactic Federation voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership status, along with permanent seats on the Security Council for Earth, Luna, and the Mars colonies. 1 year later, when the Void Hunters from the Galactic Rim launched their invasion of Federation. Space, it was human strategic planning and human tactical innovation that turned the tide of battle. The same species that had been condemned as violent primitives became the Federation's greatest protectors, and in the decades that followed, as humanity took its place as one of the galaxy's leading civilizations, the lesson of the Sol system. Battle was never forgotten. The most dangerous predator is not the one that hunts with claws and fangs. It's the one that hunts with patience, intelligence, and the wisdom to know when the hunt should end. Humanity had finally revealed its true nature to the galaxy, not as mindless killers, but as apex predators who had learned to be something more than their instincts demanded. The galaxy was safer because of it, and somewhere in the deep void between stars, ancient threats that had been watching and waiting decided that perhaps this was not the right time to test their strength against the persistent hunters of Earth. The pack had shown its fangs, and the galaxy had taken notice. The age of human space had begun. We're detecting movement from Earth's moon. Massive energy signatures activating across the lunar surface. The tactical display updated, and Thane watched in growing horror as Earth's moon transformed before his eyes. What had appeared to be natural terrain was revealed as an artificial construct of staggering complexity. Sections of the lunar surface folded back like flower petals, revealing weapon emplacements that dwarfed anything in the Coalition arsenal. The moon itself seemed to expand, unfolding into a fortress that surrounded the entire satellite. Impossible, breathed Tactical Officer Zexcaller. The energy requirements alone. How long would it take to build something like that? About 30 years, Thane realized with dawning horror. They've been preparing for this since the Bay. They joined the Federation. But the moon was only the beginning. As the Coalition fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, space itself seemed to come alive around them. Asteroids revealed themselves as camouflaged weapons platforms. Seemingly empty regions of space suddenly blazed with the engine signatures of ships dropping out of stealth. What had appeared to be cosmic debris resolved into the hulls of warships that had been waiting in perfect silence. Fleet status report. Thane demanded. Sir, we're detecting over 3,000 human vessels, Cathfowler reported, his voice shaking. They're emerging from concealment throughout the system. Our numerical advantage is not as significant as we calculated. 3,000 ships. Humanity had claimed to possess fewer than 75 military vessels. Either they had been lying about their fleet strength, or they had been building ships in secret for 3 decades. Given what Thane had learned about human deception over the past 3 months, he suspected it was both. Sir, called out Communications Officer Vextelar, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the human fleet. They're addressing individual coalition ships by name. What do you mean by name? The human commander knows the designation, crew complement, and tactical specifications of every vessel in our fleet. They're offering personalized surrender terms to each captain. Thane felt his blood turn to ice. The coalition fleet was composed of ships from 47 different species, using dozens of different communication protocols and security systems. For the humans to have such detailed intelligence about every vessel would require a level of preparation that bordered on the impossible, unless they had been gathering that intelligence for 30 years. All ships, Thane broadcast across. The coalition fleet maintain formation and prepare for combat. Do not respond to human transmissions. But even as he gave the order, Thane could see the human strategy unfolding with terrifying clarity. They weren't just trying to win a battle, they were demonstrating the depth of their preparation, the extent of their intelligence network, the sophistication of their planning. Every revelation was designed to erode coalition morale and confidence. It was psychological warfare on a scale that Thane had never imagined possible. Admiral, Cathfowler reported, the human fleet is moving into attack formation. But, sir, their tactics don't match any known military doctrine. Thane studied the tactical display. The human ships were arranging themselves in patterns that seemed almost organic, flowing around the coalition fleet like water on stones. It was unlike anything he had seen in 4 decades of military service. They're not using standard fleet tactics, he realized. They're hunting. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations to come, assuming there were any military academies left to study it. The humans fought like no other species in the galaxy. They didn't engage in the traditional exchanges of long-range fire that characterize most space battles. Instead, they used their superior maneuverability and stealth technology to get close, strike at critical systems, and withdraw before the coalition forces could respond effectively. It was persistence hunting adapted for space warfare, wearing down the enemy through countless small wounds rather than seeking decisive engagement. But the coalition's advantages were still significant. They had more ships, heavier armor, and weapons that could match anything in the human arsenal. The battle might have been even, despite the humans' tactical superiority. That was when the humans revealed their final secret. Sir, Cathfowler called out,